the Brave effect, an effect that a lot of people may like, but a lot of people may dislike because of one particular unit. In my opinion, this is the one effect in Fire Emblem Heroes that will never ever age. Unless we're talking about Schism, but that's a whole different topic on its own. Either way, this was something I wanted to talk about for a pretty long while, but I couldn't really find the time. And then we got the ninja banner. I was like, this is probably a good time. So here I am going to talk about it. But before that point, I want to first talk about this sponsor. Did you like that transition? Because I kind of didn't, but I needed one anyway.
We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC. Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones, right?
Well, I sure do. And what a good time to have one thanks to today's sponsor, Awesome Remote. Awesome Remote allows you to control your PC and play PC games remotely from your own mobile device. Remote Desktop is a fast, stable, and reliable way to remotely access your PC through something like a phone, a tablet, or another PC, and this can be used to control or troubleshoot the computers in question through your device. It's available on Windows, iOS, and Android, and it's free. Actually, well, there is one barrier of entry. You gotta have a phone. That being said, the program is free, and the coolest part about it is that it works both ways. It's rather flexible in that regard and makes it much more vastly appealing. They also have paid options if you do want to shell out a few bucks for additional features. The benefit to paying a bit of money for the extended program is that you can get stuff like remote control for Android devices, and you can enjoy more stable and faster connections in general. Likewise, there's a smart power plug which you can actually get as an extension for the program, so you don't necessarily need to keep your computer on all the time. You can still do remote access through your phone as a result of it. Just one tap to wake it up, one tap to shut it down, and put it on your phone and you're good to go. However, if you would rather try it out first, they have the free option, so you may as well give it a shot. Thanks to Awesome Remote for sponsoring the video. Brave. It is one of those effects throughout the entirety of the Fire Emblem series that has been a consistently good effect, and that's no different in Fire Emblem Heroes whatsoever. It started out as regular and heritable. Sometimes we got really good variants in the form of Whitecap or Ninja Yumi. Other times people just ran regular Brave Bow on units with really high offenses way back in the day, on units such as Bride Cordelia. Other times we did get units with dual phase Brave, starting with Sword Reinhardt, and over the years we ended up getting more and more units with it. In my opinion, it's one of those effects that just is never going to age in the game because of how much it opens to the character using it. And more specifically, the ones that could also take advantage of it in the enemy phase. The player phase version of it's a lot more flexible due to the fact that we have Bride Katria and Winter Cordelia, and outside of Ruse 4, which is going to be more consistent in something like Aether Raids than any other mode, it's not exactly as if they're completely fallen off the map, although if you don't play Summoner Duels, then you may as well consider it. Either way, one of the biggest things that comes with having the Brave effect, whether that is player phase or enemy phase, is the killing prowess, because you're getting 2 attacks no matter what, and especially the ones that were to stack it with something like Bride Katria. The ones that naturally lack Brave but have so many other effects that allow their killing prowess to be incredibly high with Brave attacks makes them some of the better nukes in the game. But even for the enemy phase ones in particular, it's so much easier to play around because foes that end up moving and reaching out to attack somebody in the enemy phase is not going to have as much of a stat swing as the person with the enemy phase Brave effect. One other thing I do appreciate about Brave in particular is that you don't necessarily have to play around speed, but depending on the unit you use, you definitely have the option for it. In fact, some units, especially for player phase purposes, don't even have to worry about it because they can run Brash Assault 4, which is an incredibly useful tool, especially if you are looking to get consistent damage output. Granted, that damage output will wholly depend on what kind of unit you're using, because in my opinion, you could only get away with so much by using Brave. You could have Brave attacks, which is great on its own, but if you're initiating combat, it's definitely going to be a lot more difficult for those kinds of units to get away with killing than it would be on the enemy phase, just because of the sheer differences when it comes to dealing damage in the player phase versus the enemy phase. But generally speaking, your Brave attackers are going to be some of the best units when it comes to bypassing stuff like Miracle also, especially for units such as Brave Seliph who have no follow-up, Miracle in their weapon, etc, etc. Although it's not limited to him specifically, the ones that could also take advantage of Miracle, it's still a very nice effect to bypass Miracle in a lot of times. But again, you're generally going to need a good attack set unless you're enemy facing, where it's a lot more flexible and you can bundle up against units. And even then, in a lot of scenarios, you could use somebody like Bride Katria or Winter Cordelia and bypass a multitude of tanks because of the free Brave attacks that you are getting out of it. And so far in this video, I've more more or less just been spouting stuff, but haven't really been providing any actual examples for this. And I guess the best way I could put this into perspective is by going over two units who, in my opinion, are generally received very well, and those would be Valentian Pala and Ninja Camilla. Valentian Pala has a dual-phase Brave adaptive weapon with Canto 2, which is very nice for hit and run strategies, and Ninja Camilla, while I wouldn't say she was as dominant as she once was, is still a very, very nice unit to have around because of her instant vantage, dual-phase Brave attacks, and res targeting status. Both of these units are still incredibly strong in my opinion. That's also exactly why I wanted to bring them up in the first place. In my opinion, the reason why these two units function as well as they do, and this isn't limited to them specifically, in all aspects related to pretty much every single dual phase Brave unit, or a lot of the Brave units in general, is that because they have Brave in their weapon. If you were to take away any other effect that they did have in their weapon, they may not be as good, but generally speaking, they would still be incredibly good units because of their free Brave attacks. But in my opinion, if you were to remove the Brave effect, they would not be nearly as good. And I think that's really the best way I can describe all this. You could take away a lot of effects from a lot of these units that have Brave or even dual phase Brave, but the moment you take away that one aspect of them, they're not nearly as threatening in my opinion. And I think Intelligent Systems knows this too, because over the course of 7+ years, we only have around 30 units that have dual phase Brave effects, some of which are definitely a lot better than others, as well as 2 dual phase Brave inheritables, which aren't really the best, and that's just mainly due to the fact that they're low might. Doesn't really help in that regard, but even then, most of these units have about 3 effects attached to their dual phase Brave weapons, just because that base effect alone is so incredibly strong. That being said, there are exceptions in stuff like Alencia and Legendary Alire, but generally speaking, most of them don't have a lot of effects, but they don't generally need a lot of them because that one effect alone is so potent in my opinion. And what was the point in all this? I think the big point really was that newer units can release and be better, but in my opinion, you can only be so bad with a Brave effect because that is one of those timeless effects that is probably never going to get countered in the game. Although we do have Schism now, and I wouldn't say that's necessarily a Brave counter. I think Bride Catcher and Winter Cordelia are its own can of worms. But as far as natural Brave is concerned, I don't think they're ever going to release something that just outright counters that. Hell, it even took them so long to counter Bride Catcher in particular that I don't even think it's a realistic scenario in a lot of areas. And for what it's worth, you could get around a lot of these units anyway because they do have natural counters. What is noteworthy about most of these units that have the Brave effect is that they are relatively slow. There are exceptions, of course, to this, but even in that scenario, you could always bypass it with a really hard-hitting special because they end up trading their bulk for speed in a lot of scenarios. So whether that's using a sweep effect, doubling them, or just hitting them with a really hard special, there are ways of getting around these units anyway. I just find that they have some of the best killing prowess in the game because of the 2 free attacks that they will always have. And in conclusion, Brave good, but also Schism is good. I don't mind Catria counters existing.